hunting,
fishing,
cooking,
camping,
conservation,
travel,
gardening,
photography, family.
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 This is the Outdoor Rules Podcast. All right. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. Mike here. Another one of these episodes we're recording back in Quentin, Pennsylvania. I'm home with family, and I've been kind of excited to do this episode for quite a while. I think that there's an interesting connection for our family and kind of for me personally with Theodore Roosevelt, who's obviously kind of a conservation legend and figures large both in the hunting and in the conservation world. But I wanted to explore those connections that I feel to Teddy Roosevelt and that I think a lot of us do. So anyway, extra special guest here today. Meemaw's here.
Hello.
Hi, Meemaw.
Hi, Michael.
Meemaw just pointed out to us that her voice is not included in the intro for the podcast. So maybe...
Doesn't bother me in the least.
No, it didn't seem that way at all when you brought it up. So maybe we'll need to work on a new intro at some point. All right, Poppy's here too.
Hi.
Hi, Poppy.
Hi. Good afternoon.
And Mark.
Hello.
Hey, Mark. So Teddy Roosevelt obviously, was a big figure in American history and in American politics for a whole lot of reasons, and probably the president that we associate most closely, most intimately with hunting, and certainly with the early days of conservation. But for us as a family, there's kind of an even earlier connection to him. Mom, talk about this town that we're in that we talk about so often on the podcast.
This town named Quentin had several names over the course of many, many years. I think one was Harmony. I definitely know one was Eby's Corner. The one when all my aunts and uncles and my mother were born, the name of the town was Bismarck.
And somewhere in there, too, we found that it was what, Mark?
Liberty Corner?
Liberty Corner or Independence something? Independence Village?
Independence Village, sorry.
It was
like I said, Independence Village.
Okay, so when your mother was born, it was Bismarck.
Correct. And she was born in 1913.
She was born in 1913. And obviously Bismarck is the name of a city.
In Germany.
Right. And in the middle 1910s, we started fighting a war, the First World War, with Germany as the main enemy combatant, right?
Correct.
So at that point, this town is named after a city in a country that we are at war with. And how then did the name of the town come to be Quentin?
Well, I think the townsfolk, after learning that Teddy Roosevelt's son Quentin was killed in World War I, they wanted to disconnect from the Bismarck connection and honor Quentin Roosevelt. So it was renamed Quentin, and it has been that since that time.
And so Quentin Roosevelt, I think, was the youngest son of Theodore Roosevelt. I think maybe the youngest son from his first marriage. I'd have to check that. I think he had 5 kids overall, but I think that that was from 2 different marriages. But anyway.
I think I recall seeing it was his youngest son.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd have to look that up. Anyway, Mark, do you know anything about Quentin Roosevelt?
Other than he was what we know about him from the town history, and believe he died in 1918.
Yeah, he was an aviator. He was a World War I pilot. I think, from what I understand, he had one confirmed kill of an enemy airplane, of a German airplane, and then he was shot down and killed in battle in 1918 in France. And so, like you're saying, Mom, then the people of what is now Quentin decided to change the name of the town from Bismarck to Quentin to honor Quentin Roosevelt.
Correct.
And I tried to find it, but I wasn't able to come up with it. I think you said, or somebody told me, that there's a letter from Theodore Roosevelt to the town that's in at the Historical Society.
And a silver bowl.
Oh.
A silver bowl and a letter. Kate actually has gone to see it.
I see. I tried to find the transcript of that letter, but I wasn't able to track that down.
More or less thanking the town for their thoughtfulness of honoring his son.
Right. So, this town that you and Mark and I were essentially born in, our birthplace, was named after one of Teddy Roosevelt's kids, and there is a historical marker to that effect. It's actually over by our church, kind of at the top of the hill as you're coming into town.
Growing up, it was on the school.
Oh, really?
Yes. When the school was torn down, that plaque was removed.
Oh, the plaque was on the elementary school.
Well, it was a high school at one point. The oldest of my mom's siblings, was born in 1898. He graduated from that school.
Oh, I didn't know that.
My mother went there till 8th grade and then down to Cornwall.
Oh, that's cool.
I went there till 5th grade and then down to Cornwall.
And then today I went up, and I'm not 100% sure that I had ever read the plaque before. I knew it was there, but I didn't know what the inscription was. So here is what the plaque says. This town renamed Quentin in memory of Quentin Roosevelt. Only those are fit to live who do not fear to die, and none are fit to die who have shrunk from the joy of life and the duty of life. Both life and death are parts of the same great adventure. Never yet was worthy adventure worthily carried through by the man who put his personal safety first. Theodore Roosevelt. Erected under the auspices of the Patriotic Order of the Sons of America of Pennsylvania, 1920. So really, it's a pretty interesting history for the town, and then kind of moving on from that history, the next thing I kind of connection that I feel is Mom, your dad, Pop Bud, who we talked about, I think, in the 3rd episode of the podcast. He did lots of things in life, and he was a Navy veteran, and you can hear all about that in that episode. But a few times there, and maybe in the one about rifles, Mark, we mentioned a rifle that Pop Bud took in on trade for some wallpaper work, which was a 405 Winchester in a model 1895 Winchester. So, again, if you're not into this stuff, Winchester
and I'm not.
And you're not, Mom. Mom's looking at me like, what are you talking about?
He took a lot of things as trade. I mean,
yeah.
But
right. It was a rifle made by Winchester. The rifle model was 1895, which was the first year of production. And it was chambered. The cartridge is 405 Winchester, which was at the time it was made, it was the most powerful repeating rifle available in the world.
Did he get a good deal?
He probably got a great deal, because if we know anything about Pop Bud, it's that he liked to make a good deal, right?
Yes.
Yeah, he was a deal maker.
And a barterer.
Yeah, which I love about him. I think I got a little bit of that.
Definitely.
But that make of rifle, the Model 1895, was actually one of its first major uses was in the Spanish-American War. And, of course, Mark, do you know what happened in the Spanish-American War?
Teddy led a group of soldiers that
Right.
basically won the war.
Dad, do you
Rough Riders?
I'm trying to think of the Rough Riders up which hill?
San Juan Hill.
San Juan
the
Hill.
charge
Yep.
up San
Yep.
Juan Hill.
Yes.
So that war, the Spanish-American War, was fought. Those battles were fought in Cuba, and that's where Teddy Roosevelt's really famous military service came from, where he led this group called the Rough Riders on a charge up San Juan Hill. They did not use Model 1895 Winchesters, or at least that wouldn't have been the normal rifle that the Rough Riders would have been carrying. But regardless, there's a connection there. And then he's more associated with the rifle from a hunting standpoint because it was a very powerful rifle. It was one that he particularly took to Africa. I think he hunted North American big game with it too. I think he may have hunted bison with it. But he took it to Africa, and there's some very famous pictures of Teddy Roosevelt with that rifle with African big game. And we'll kind of get into this element of the story eventually here, but he was very much, particularly after his presidencies, he did a lot of traveling, and he did a lot of big game hunting. And in some circles, he's kind of viewed as a trophy hunter, which he certainly did some trophy hunting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But his conservation legacy is really kind of hard to overstate. And like I said, we'll get there on that. But it does lead me to the next part of the story for me anyway. And I kind of feel like a little bit this keeps getting more personal in some ways for me. But when I got out of college, I went, my first real job in the biology field was an internship in Yellowstone National Park. And Mark, did you ever come to visit me when I was there?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
You visited Yellowstone?
Yeah, it was 30 below.
We were out a bunch. I think one of the years you interned, the first time I was out, you were interning, and our other brother Davey, Dad, and Uncle Sim came out.
Oh, yeah.
And that was the Rock Creek incident.
Rock Creek. R-O-C-K Rock. Yeah.
But, yeah, I was out a bunch with you. I spent some time out there working on a golf course for a short spell with you. And
oh, yeah, you worked in Livingston.
I worked in Livingston. It's windy there for anybody who...
I forgot so much of this stuff. But anyway, Mom, Dad, you guys came to visit Yellowstone, I don't know.
Quite often. Half a dozen times at least.
And I was there from 2000. I think my first summer was in maybe 2001.
Our first visit was 2003. You were at Lake. It was Lana, Ann, Dad, and I.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure it was after my cancer diagnosis and treatments.
Huh. I remember that trip well. I mean, I know that we got to spend
We
a lot of time.
came in the fall, came
Yep.
around Labor Day.
Toured all around the park.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And, you know, Teddy Roosevelt, the way he figures into the park, I think it gets confused a lot. The park was established in 1872. It was the first national park in the world. which was long before Roosevelt was president. So he was not instrumental in the founding of the park, but he was instrumental in the sort of general conservation movement in national parks and protected federal lands, and then some legislation that really kind of established things that could and couldn't happen there. So much so that the main entrance to the park, the north entrance to the park at Gardner, Montana, there's a big stone arch there. You used to be able to drive through it. I think they may have changed the entrance so that it doesn't go through the arch anymore.
We could drive through it when we were there, but I assume since the flood that may have changed.
I think they changed it not long after Caitlin and I left, but I could be wrong about that. Anyway, that's Roosevelt Arch, and
It was my favorite entrance to the park, and I think it was because of that arch and I think there's a plaque or a reading on that I found meaningful.
right. And so that's called Roosevelt Arch, and he really does figure pretty big in the history of Yellowstone, you know, and generally in the conservation movement. And, you know, to touch back on the whole thing about hunting, you know, that is an example of where Teddy Roosevelt was fully in support and helped to establish that hunting was not a use of the national parks, particularly of Yellowstone National Park. That you know, he was a hunter and he was known that way, but he was also a conservationist and recognized that in the case of Yellowstone, those wildlife being there for people to see and people to experience was important, and that hunting was not, you know, going to be one of the uses of the park, which I think is you know, is a pretty cool thing. And then later, when I left the park and I went to graduate school, and when I moved back, I became roommates with a coworker there in the park. His name is Jeff Arnold. Jeff still works for the National Park Service, although not in Yellowstone anymore. And the place that Jeff rented and I moved into, and then eventually Jeff moved out and I stayed there. Dad, what about that place?
The cabin on Cedar Creek?
The cabin on Cedar Creek.
That was a fun place. Turned in to Cedar Creek at Dick Randall Point. And one of the questions and one of the things I was thinking about that I don't remember, before I get to the building itself, the road that went past the cabin, you were the last cabin going up the road before it turned into National Forest, or was it?
Well, yeah, it was National Forest.
And from there, about a mile up, it went to what was the OTO Lodge, which I understand right now they're really redoing and taking people in to see it. But the OTO Lodge was the first dude ranch, is what I think they call it, that was in the western part of the country, and a lot of people hunted out of there, and a lot of people, I remember the Dodge children, which is, I'm talking about associated with Dodge, the car company. And my question being, do you know that Roosevelt ever hunted out of there, or was there?
Yeah. So the answer to your question is yes.
Yeah.
So the OTO Lodge was, at least to my understanding, was the first dude ranch in Montana, the first big guest ranch operation to bring Easterners or dudes out to the west. It was established in the 1880s by a guy named Howard Eaton, which there is a trail in Yellowstone National Park named the Howard Eaton Trail. And then you mentioned Dick Randall Point. Dick Randall Point's kind of a high spire of rocks. It's up along the road there. It's along the road into the OTO Ranch. Yes. I think that Dick Randall was maybe just a really well-known wrangler on the ranch. It was either that or he was a later owner. But the ranch was was originally obviously privately held, and like Dad's saying, the place that I lived was, I don't know, a mile or so off the highway there, off Highway 89, and it was, if it had been any closer to Cedar Creek, you would have to say that it was in Cedar Creek.
That's when we came back to the house. That's what I was going to say. I mean, I think that it was probably 3 feet off the one corner would be the northeast corner.
Yeah.
Off the northeast corner, Cedar Creek might have been within 3 feet of it.
In fact, one time Cedar Creek was in my basement.
Oh, well.
I remember when you showered,
Maybe your basement
it was right out the window.
Yeah, there was a window in the shower, and you were looking. And in fact, one time I got home from work, and I went to take a shower, and I looked out across the creek, and there was a mountain lion laying there on its back like a cat, just like laying there sleeping. It was an amazing, absolutely amazing place. And one time in the really bitter cold snap in the winter, an ice dam formed behind the house, and it backed water up into the basement, and there was about 3 feet of water and growing in the basement of the place.
Maybe that helped get rid of the wood rats that were in the basement.
Yeah, there was a wood rat problem there.
They were really.
I wouldn't go in the basement,
No.
which is where I think the washer dryer was.
That's true. Yeah,
And it was like, nope.
Yeah.
Here's the laundry. Somebody take it down and put it in. Move it to the dryer and bring it back up.
Luckily, there was a wood stove in the basement. So after we got the water out, I just started the wood stove down there and got everything dried out.
Dried
real
everything
fast.
out real
Yeah.
fast.
Well, the other thing I remember, I really liked the house. First off, right as you pull into the house, there was an old pump in the.
Oh yeah, like a one
was
lunger.
Like one lunger
engine.
pump right in the thing, and when Sim went out there with us, that really interested him and me. But also, the house was rectangular, and the long end was along the creek. And if you went into the end that would have been the north end, that one that was closest to the creek was just roughly the kitchen, and then there was a corridor running down the one side of the house, and then the living room was in the far end, and there were a couple bedrooms in between there on the way, and it was a great place. When Mike lived there, he got the greatest dog I've ever known, Atticus. Called him Gus, and he had him over there at winter, and he trained him, and he was one of the best dogs and the best trained dogs I ever knew. But what I really enjoyed doing is throwing the balls down the corridor and him chasing it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we spent a lot of time doing that. So I don't know if you want to do any more in the house. I could get into hunting here if you want to.
Well, yeah, I mean, just to say, and we've mentioned this once or twice before, maybe in the episode where Matt fell off the horse. By the way, Robert asked Caitlin today if they could listen to the podcast when they were on their way to Albuquerque, and then he specifically said he wanted to listen to the part about Matt falling off the horse.
Matt.
So that's a favorite in my house. But the house was the last place, the last cabin, like you're saying, before a Forest Service trailhead, which was only about 100 yards up the road. Big trailhead, big enough to get horse trailers in and turned around. And then there was a locked gate, but the road continued back to what was the OTO ranch operation, the historic operation. So I believe in the mid-90s, the ranch was sold or transferred from private ownership to the Forest Service. There was a deal that I believe Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks and the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation and obviously the Forest Service were all involved. And it came into public ownership. There was a county sheriff that lived back there that was kind of a caretaker, so it was a road that was maintained enough that it could be driven on. The county sheriff drove back there, but it was gated and closed to the public. But it was about a mile, and then you were at the buildings, and the old historic original lodge was still there, and there were, 6 or 8 individual cabins and at least that many more outbuildings. And I mean, it's like exactly what you would imagine for like a fancy kind of guest ranch, big, beautiful lodge, and they were open. You could go in there. And
yeah, you could the door on the side. You could get in the door on the side. I don't know.
Oh, I think you go right in the front door.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
But and what I remember is kind of had a stone base, and then there were big logs. Made the lodge was made out of big logs, which was really beautiful.
Right. And then, of course, because they had a bunch of livestock there, and cattle had been ranched on it. There were a lot of old hay meadows, kind of scattered in the mile or two around the place, and we did lots of deer hunting right around there. But it was kind of the place that my early time in Montana, particularly my elk hunting, was focused, because it was right out the back door. I mean, we literally every day we would walk out and head up there, and that was the first year, I think, that I was there full time and was a Montana resident was 2006. And you guys came out that year and spent quite a bit of time.
Well, let me ask you, what I recall, the picture that I have in the gun cabinet is you with a big set of elk antlers over your shoulder, and that was with, what was the outfitter that was over in?
Yeah, that was an elk that...
Wasn't that before, though, we were there?
That was probably in the winter of 2005. That may have been in January of 2006, so it would have been the very end. There used to be in Gardner at that time, there was a January elk hunt, and it was the most coveted elk hunt in the state of Montana. And I had gone out one morning just for a walk to look at elk, and I saw a ton of bulls and some really nice ones. And later I was standing in my driveway, and these two guys went driving past in a truck, and I can't remember if I walked up to the trailhead or I encountered them somehow, and they told me, "Oh yeah, we have an elk hunt next week that starts next weekend." And we just kind of had a conversation, and I hunted with them. Joe Tate is the name of the guy who had the elk tag, and he's the sister of Donna McDonald, and Jake and Donna McDonald own Upper Canyon Outfitters on the Ruby River. And the first morning we killed what is very likely to be the biggest bull elk that I ever get to be a part of harvesting it. I think it scored 383 or something. It was.
I had the picture hanging in with it over your shoulders, carrying the antlers out.
Yeah. But hunting there in January was an entirely different thing than hunting there in the regular season in October and November.
But then, of course, we were pumped up and came out the next season, I think.
Yeah. And that 2006 season was successful.
Yes, that's when I shot my first bull.
Right.
And I think to add what Michael said earlier, his house or cabin was at roughly 5,500 feet above sea level. And we would walk out the back of that and never, ever got even close to the top of where we could go.
Right.
I shot that bull in that year probably, I think, 82 or 8,300 feet or something like that. And that was the day before Thanksgiving. And as we were walking out, you were there, I think, weren't you, with Jeff? And what he
yeah, we were like you said, we
quartered it.
Right.
And hung it up in a tree and came with, I think, just the back straps and the antlers.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
And as we broke out of the timber, there was another herd of elk there.
Yeah.
And Dad's cousin Jeff, man, he took a knee, and I had my binos, and I gave him a range, and he said, "Is he legal?" Because they had to be brow tine bulls, and I said, "Yep, he's legal." And man, he one shot knocked that elk straight down. And so then we had two elk down.
Yeah. The day before Thanksgiving.
Yeah, and I think that one we just gutted.
Yeah, well,
that night.
Yeah, Dave and Jeff gutted him. Dave Arnold and Jeff gutted him.
And then we went back the next day. Todd Kuhl, who I worked for in Yellowstone and who still lives there, had horses, probably the same horses that Matt had the incident with. And we went back up on Thanksgiving Day, packed those 2 elk off the mountain, and then went over to the Kuhl's house for Thanksgiving dinner. And then 2007 is a season I talk about all the time because you spent a ton of time there in 2007, and I hunted a ton, and we never saw legal bull elk that year. That's when I think that was in the Unscheduled Landings episode where you talked about the rocks exploding on the stove. And then in 2008, Jeff and I, you were out again with Jeff again, and Jeff and I were together, and I shot my first Montana bull elk, my first bull elk ever, about 100 yards from where you got yours on the day before Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. So we both took elk, and that spot, I don't mind talking about it now because I don't live there anymore, but that was on, as you go up, that was on the right side was Timber Mountain, which was mostly timber covered, and the left side was High Mountain. And we were up on Timber Mountain in the timber for both of those bulls. And I just, you obviously we started this off talking about Teddy Roosevelt, but, he did, in fact, go to the OTO and hunt numerous times. And like you mentioned, it was a place that a lot of prominent Americans, of that time went to spend time either in the summer or to go hunting.
I mean, the trails we went up to get there, more than likely he tread those trails.
It's like it almost gives me goosebumps to just think about, the fact that I was fortunate enough to hunt, and we were fortunate enough to harvest our first elk. Kind of literally in his footsteps. He probably,
right.
He probably at some point in his life hunted his way through that same timber where we got those bulls.
And for me, it was some of the most, I don't know, the roughest, not necessarily roughest, but the most, almost, I'm going to say dangerous and wildest places that maybe I've hunted, in that you saw a grizzly.
Oh, yeah.
That one year, I think there were, within a very short radius around that area, something like 10 or 15 people that were attacked by grizzlies. That was a year that supposedly something was wrong with the pine nuts up high or something like that, and all the grizzlies came down. And I think it was even one of the prominent safety officers at the park or something was attacked. I saw wolves, within 150 yards. So, I mean, it was an interesting and a nice place to hunt.
Yeah, it was a really special place. And to kind of get back to Teddy Roosevelt and that conservation legacy, I think it's really hard to overstate the importance of Teddy Roosevelt to the things that we really love to do. There's a really great book called The Big Burn, and The Big Burn is about a big wildfire, but it's really about the formation of the Forest Service and Gifford Pinchot and Teddy Roosevelt and their relationship and how they kind of navigated the early American landscape regarding public lands, particularly in the West, but really everywhere. And there was a big push at that time to privatize a lot of that land so that it could be sort of timbered or minerals could be developed everywhere. And there was really a major battle between the trusts, between big corporations and land barons, and I mean, kind of personally, Teddy Roosevelt and Gifford Pinchot, and a very ugly political battle at times, in which ultimately Roosevelt and Pinchot mostly prevailed. But if they hadn't fought that fight, we just wouldn't really have the public land system that we have in this country now, which, I mean, Mark, you hunt public land here in Pennsylvania, quite a bit of it, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which is much more state forest than national forest, but I mean, especially in the West, there just would not be the same landscape for people like us to do the hunting and fishing that we love to do.
Absolutely.
And that public trust doctrine, that idea that those resources should exist for the benefit and enjoyment of the public is really something that was important and propagated by Roosevelt. And it trickles down not just, I think, directly to the public lands, but also the whole North American model of wildlife management, and that idea of the public trust, and that the fish and the wildlife don't belong to private interests, that they are essentially a good that is for the public benefit, is just so completely foundational to virtually all fish and wildlife management in this country now. And I think you even see that, in how we manage fisheries and raise and stock fish, and how we manage hunting everywhere across the whole country. And it's basically something that very likely wouldn't exist without Teddy Roosevelt.
Yeah. It's pretty incredible foresight that he had.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, it's part of, in my opinion, it's part of what makes Teddy Roosevelt such an interesting person, is that if you look at who he was and the privilege that he came from, because he was from a rich New York family, he very easily could have been exactly the opposite person. He just could have been, he could have almost been a robber baron in his own right, if that's how he had wanted to live his life. And, according to the biographies of him, his father was not that way and instilled a sense of public service and a sense of duty in terms of people of privilege should work to help less fortunate people out. And thanks, Mom and Dad. I think thanks to Teddy Roosevelt's mom and dad, but similarly thanks to you guys for, I think being the same kind of people, instilling the idea that there's a greater good, because, that's the kind of thing, parents instilling that in kids does the world so much good. And in the case of Teddy Roosevelt, his dad teaching him that.
You're making me feel like going bully.
I want to carry a big stick.
Well, I don't know about that. I can't speak softly, so. But no, I mean, it's really an amazing life that he led when you consider that, he turned the privilege he had on his head, in the sense that he really saw it as a duty to not allow other people to take advantage of both people and the country's natural resources at a time when they were really very vulnerable.
Well, I think what I would say is I think probably he was at the OTO Lodge and he saw what was there and he wanted to preserve it.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, he hunted the OTO, which is on the doorstep. It's 10 miles north of the park,
Right.
while at the same time recognizing that the park should be set off limits from hunting.
Yeah.
And that's a duality that really speaks to me, and it speaks to me in the sense that I think it's easy to look at Teddy Roosevelt, holding that 405 Winchester with a rhino in Africa, and be very put off by that, and feel like, how could we celebrate this person as a conservationist? But if you look at the legacy, if you look overall at the totality of what he did, it is really hard to argue that he is probably the most important conservation figure in American history. And in fact, I still really greatly respect. There's a nonprofit organization called the Teddy Roosevelt Conservation Partnership, whose work I still really respect. I think they do a great job of blending, the history of hunting and the contributions of hunting to conservation, with modern conservation and wildlife management. And then, I guess, anybody else have anything else to really add to this one? I guess I had one more thought.
Do you remember at what age you became enamored with Teddy? Did he play into your journey into public service, into the scientific field? I know, personally, and eventually I'm sure we'll have a podcast about him, but Hemingway was huge for you. Did you feel that same draw to Roosevelt at a young age?
No. I think it was more a slow recognition of the connections and, a sort of learned respect for exactly how much he had contributed.
I would think that when you ended up with a 405 and found out that Teddy was shooting a 405 and was known for that, I think that helped you a little bit to look into Teddy a little bit more.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah.
And I carried that gun in a couple of days. I'd still like to go back there and try to get an elk with that 405 on Timber Mountain. Mom, anything else about Quentin?
One time on PBS there was a documentary by, I believe, Ken Burns. Did he do a lot of documentaries? Yeah. And he did one on Teddy Roosevelt, and Quentin and the changing from Bismarck to Quentin was mentioned in that documentary.
We got to mention in a Ken Burns documentary?
Yeah, we did.
Well, that's worth. I'm sure I've watched it, but I'll have to go back and check it out.
Yeah. So that was.
I think he may have done a Roosevelt's where he covered both.
Yes, I think so.
Because there's a relation, even though the last name's spelled differently, there is a relation between Theodore Roosevelt and Franklin Delano
FDR,
Roosevelt.
Yeah.
Definitely, because we had tea with Eleanor at Campobella.
Mm-hmm.
On Campobella
Island up in New Brunswick.
Not actually with Eleanor.
Eleanor Roosevelt probably wasn't there.
She was not.
No, she couldn't make it that day.
No.
But Teddy was mentioned when the presenters were talking. That two women were quite knowledgeable and really did a wonderful presentation and served delicious tea and cookies. But Teddy was mentioned as being part of that.
And I believe the only national park that is shared by Canada and the United States
is where?
Is in Campobello Island, just across the bay, or just across the bridge from Lubec, Maine.
I did not know that.
Yes.
There you go.
It was FDR's. We're getting into FDR now instead of Teddy,
Different,
but it was FDR's summer home, and where he found out he had polio and a bunch of other things. It's an interesting place, but that could be a whole other story.
Yeah. Yeah, and Mark, you mentioned public service. I think that for me, that is one of those things that really resonates with me and Teddy Roosevelt. He very much had a public service attitude. He very much saw himself as a public servant for the public good, and he was routinely criticized for it. He was an imperfect person in so many ways, but he took the attitude that it's easy to criticize when you're not the person who's responsible, for making the decisions or for implementing the actions, and that it's more important, to fight the battles even if you might lose. That it's just something that you have to keep doing and keep fighting. And probably my favorite quote of all time about, or the one that resonates with me professionally the most, is his "man in the arena" quote, which is this:
"It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds? Who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions? Who spends himself in a worthy cause? Who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement? And who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat."
Anyway, that's my favorite Roosevelt quote. All right. Well, anybody got anything else in closing?
Bully.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for doing this. We'll close it out. I love you guys.
Love you too.
Hunting and fishing, the great outdoors, mixing history, laughter, love, and folklore, creating memories with family and friends. These are the trophies that matter in the end. Outdoor running.